What would you do with your life if you knew you could never retire? That is actually what success looks like for me. A lot of people that don't have money, they're like, oh, if I had $1 million, I would retire and hang out on the beach. That's why you'll never have $1 million. I made millions of dollars. I didn't have to work for a while. If I didn't change my lifestyle, I would have been good. But there was a part of me that just had a desire for more. Built and exited 3 software companies. I've invested in over 100 companies. I currently have the world's largest coaching organization for software CEOs, over 1,000 active clients. Some people get stuck on $10 problems and they wonder why the world never gives them $1 million problems.
Dan Martell.
What's up, Brian?
What's up, buddy? How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Dude, all the way down here from Canada. What are you doing in Austin, Texas? What are you doing on the media tour? Talk me through it. Walk me through it.
I got a lot this week. Okay, let me think about what we did. I think we're at 12 or 13 podcasts, and that's in 2.5 days. I also keynoted an event. But then, my new favorite hobby is going to the Comedy Mothership. I don't know. Yeah, so I went to Kill Tony, Shane Gillis, Ron White. I may go back tonight. We'll see if I can sneak out of my dinner thing. And just having a blast, man, working with the entrepreneurs. And then I've got my SaaS Academy. I have a group of software CEOs that I coach. So like, I don't coach, but I facilitate and mentor. So that's what I've been doing for the last few days.
Dude, heck yeah. You're running around like crazy, man. So you're the author of Buy Back Your Time, which we'll get into here in the podcast interview. This is all really funny because this all originated from a video yesterday. Well, you and I got introduced by a mutual friend, David Lecco.
David Lecco, yeah.
But before, I posted a video on Instagram yesterday and it got like 10,000 people watched it. And it's hilarious because me and you were about to get booked.
It's been seen by 10,000 people?
10,000 people saw this. And this is the video for people that are listening to the podcast. All right. I called it out step by step. This was yesterday, and now today just happened.
Right, this is a public call out for Dan Martell. Dan, my friend, when you listen to this, when you watch this, here is what is about to happen step by step. I am going to reread your book cover to cover. Again, I'm going to actually execute and implement every single thing that you talk about. By Friday, I'm going to put job descriptions up for a key position that I have been waiting to do, and now I'm going to finally do it. So I'm going to execute. Then after that, I'm going to send you a text message. I'm going to say, yo, it's Brian. We need to do that podcast we were talking about. Then we're going to do the best podcast ever. I'm going to love it. You're going to love it. Thousands of people are going to love it. It's going to be amazing. We're going to become best friends. After that, I'm going to say, Dan, it would be a great idea. You should come speak in person to the Action Academy squad in September at our next event. We got like 100 people coming. After that, we're going to have a great time. We're going to become best friends, do millions of dollars together, and then I'll go leave you a 5-star rating and review on Amazon.
All that for a 5-star rating.
All that for a 5-star rating.
Yeah.
But man, no, it's funny. I tell people all the time, I say, shoot your shot. Even though that wasn't the direct result of this interview, I tell people to do that all the time. And you're somebody that does the same as well.
You shot the shot. And what's crazy is, and you had him on your list. So she messages you
this morning,
not because of that post.
Yeah. So Dan Martell, buy back your time, get unstuck, reclaim your freedom, build your empire. Love this book. This is a very timely time for me to read this. I am like the person that you wrote this for, right at that $1 million mark, which we'll get into in this podcast episode. But before we get going, introduce yourself to the audience for people that do not know who the heck is Dan Martell.
Yeah. Who am I? Most people know me as like the software guy. So I've built and exited 3 software companies. I've invested in over 100 companies. I currently have the world's largest coaching organization for software CEOs. That's David Lecco from Deal Machine. I've coached David for years. We have over 1,000 active clients. I actually don't coach in that program anymore, so I have a whole team that runs that. And then I also have Holdco, which is essentially $100 million in capital that we buy software companies with. And then I also wrote the best-selling book, Buy Back Your Time, and father of 2 incredible boys, Irish twins, so they're 11 months apart, which is wacky. And then obviously husband to my beautiful wife, Renee Warren, she loves when I give her a shout out.
Hey,
like, why don't you mention me? There.
Yeah, with the Irish twins, you brought back your time, man.
There you go. Yeah, get them done quick.
Efficiency, baby.
Yeah.
I love it, man. You're doing all this stuff. You've got all this success with venture, angel investing, selling 3 companies, which is a feat in and of itself. Why write the book in the middle of all of this? What was the reasoning and the call? Because you don't really make that much money from books.
I don't make any money from that book.
Yeah.
The reason, predominantly because I wrote the book with a traditional publisher, so Penguin Random House.
So you got negative money.
Yeah, it was a lot of time. I wrote the book, jokingly I say I wrote it to buy back my time because people kept asking me how I do what I do. And it's a lot easier for me to say, hey, read this first. But the truth is I think that everybody's here to try to help other people in some way, in their own way. And the thing that I wanted to help every entrepreneur do is build a company they don't grow to hate. Because I think that's actually the largest destruction of wealth in entrepreneurship land, is that a CEO or founder gets to a place where they wake up and they go, this isn't what I signed up for. This hurts my family. It hurts me. Like, it's painful. And they decide to shut it down and go do something else. And what they'll discover, and it's funny because we had a guy named Jason Cohen on at the event this morning. He built WP Engine. They power 2% of the internet, billionaire. And he even said it to the room, like, hey, don't forget, when you start the company, the reason you start the company is to build it the way you want to build it. And if you ever wake up one day and realize that what you're doing isn't what you want to be doing, there's more than one option than selling the company or shutting it down. You can actually, you have permission to renegotiate the teams and who reports to you and what you work on, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the main reason I wrote the book, is to help entrepreneurs that I would never have the chance to meet, people I care about that may never be in a position to work with me, get their freedom back.
Yeah, writing a book, I think everybody should write a book, because after you write a book, you put everything into it, and then you realize you have this heightened appreciation for art and for other books. And you're like, and even for YouTube, once you make a couple YouTube videos, you're like, holy shit, this is insanely difficult, more difficult than I anticipated. And then you give it out to the world and you say, please don't kill the thing that has spent half a year or 2 years making. So I'm curious, like, do you have any perspectives that have shifted since before writing the book versus after through the process?
Yeah, I mean, I underestimated the power of the book by at least 10x.
Wow.
Like, huge. I would say that's even an understatement, probably like 25 or 50x. And it's funny in retrospect, because anytime I drive around in one of my fancy cars and kids stop and ask me, what do you do? I go, I know you want to know what I do, but it's how I got here that is the question, a better question. And I say, the reason I'm driving this kind of car is because of the books I've read. And some of the kids jokingly say, oh, you got paid to read books? And I'm like, no, I didn't get, that's not how I made my money, but I am built by books. 100%. I can tell you, out of the over 1,800 books that I've opened up and started, I'm not saying I finished every one, between audiobooks and Kindle and physical copies. And again, I've been doing this for over 25 years. I can tell you the lessons I've learned that have impacted my life that still are present today, from a Tony Robbins, a John Maxwell, Simon Sinek, you name it. For me to underestimate that value of a book is funny. The biggest thing that's come from it is just realizing that some people learn in that format.
Correct.
And I'm out there producing content. We have a pretty big channel on Instagram, and YouTube's friggin' skyrocketing right now, and LinkedIn, even TikTok, dude. I guess I'm 1 million followers on TikTok, and I'm not dancing around in a crop top.
With the culture.
Yeah, I'm like there. I know more about current culture than most 10-year-olds. And all that being said, the book, I think, will be the most important thing I've ever done.
Wow.
Because it allows people to really reflect on their situation, to get a complete system for getting that outcome, and to work through some of the demons that they're struggling with. Because at the end of the day, it's really about, as Jim Rohn often says, it's who you have to become to achieve that next level. And what I try to do in that book, and I think it's pretty good, I did a good job, is to give people a roadmap to becoming the higher version of themselves so that they can tackle bigger problems.
Yeah, and also, that's great Jim Rohn quote, and you accomplished it. You knocked it out of the park with the book. There's another Zig Ziglar quote that I really enjoy, which is, the best way to get anything you want in life is to help enough other people get what they want at scale.
100%.
And so that's why we podcast. That's why we make videos. That's why we write books. It's a labor of love. It's like you do it because it needs to be done. And then you just put it out there and then help as many people. And then all of a sudden you're shocked at what comes back to you.
Totally.
So I have a personal story that I'll shorten really quickly, but it was essentially, I've been able to have my short-term success. I said, you are here with your media team, and I'm looking at this and I'm already taking notes. Like, this is what I want my next year to look like. This is what I want my 2025, my 2026 to look like. But I have enough success to be able to go travel around the world, do what I want. And I was in Norway, and I was sitting on a bench, and I was watching the sunset. It was a Tuesday. And as I was sitting on that bench, I was like, man, one day I'm going to build up these companies. I'm going to get tens of millions, 50 million, 100 million. And then all of a sudden I'm going to delegate everything off, all just so that I can be able to have the freedom to come sit back on this bench on a Tuesday and have nothing to do. So it's a question of what keeps you going? Why do you keep going? Because eventually, like, you're past the point where finances really matter to you. Another $100,000 towards you per month probably isn't going to materially change your life. So can you give advice to people that are at that level or they're getting up to that level? How do you keep the motivation when you have these successful exits, when you have these successful businesses? How do you keep going and doing these media tours, podcast tours, and writing these books after all the success?
I think you actually touched on it, Brian. It's a beautiful question. The only way, so there's two types of energy to create. There's a dark energy, which is based off of proving people wrong, accomplishment, desire, recognition, possessions. Like it's acquisition of external objects to validate to people that you feel or you value their opinion so that you can finally feel a certain way because you want to have that validation. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if it's your parents, your neighbors, the kids that bullied you at school, the coworker that didn't believe in your dream or whatever. And that is a powerful force, but that is a dark energy. It burns like diesel fuel.
Heavy.
Very heavy. What I would encourage people to consider, and this is what allows me to keep building regardless of the financial impact, is the desire to help other people. In many ways, I think it's it creates so much more, right? Like I want to show up every day and ask myself, not how little effort can I put in to get an outcome, which I think is what most entrepreneurs do. Like people starting off, they literally brag about how little they work to make as much money as they can.
Yeah.
And you can make some money doing that.
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to start waking up every day and asking yourself, how do I create more value for my customer than anybody else in the world? How do I show up and pour into other people more than any other person for them? How do I show up and express myself at the highest level so that I can serve people, even if there's a chance I may never, ever benefit from that interaction? Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is why I do what I do.
God, I love that. I have a mentor and somebody that's also been on the podcast. His name's Ben Kenny. He's a really accomplished entrepreneur. And he was like, first step is learn how to make $1 million a year. And he's like, then you learn how to net $1 million. Then you learn how to pay your team $1 million. He's like, how do you get the top 5 people around you $1 million a year?
100%.
Then how do you give $1 million? How do you comfortably, not out of the company, out of your pocket, how do you make so much money that you can comfortably give $1 million away? And you said something that was really interesting about light versus dark energy, about it like burning really difficult and heavy. And that's what gets you up to that first level of success. And I think myself and a lot of people that are listening to this have experienced this firsthand or are experiencing this today. You trade a 40-hour work week for a 100-hour business. Congratulations, you won. Yeah. I want to talk about, before we get into the solution, which your book provides, buy back your time. We're going to talk about systems, frameworks, all this good stuff. Before we do that, let's further diagnose the issue. Let's talk about this dark energy that was fueling you in the past. Like, what was Dan Martell? Who was Dan Martell before all of this happened? And what was the inflection point that for you? You were like, I need to start doing things differently if I want to continue doing this thing called business.
It's very simple, man. In my 20s, I started a company, and it was after 2 failed companies. So like I started, I think in my teenage years, early 20s, and just had back-to-back failures. And there was a period for probably 2 or 3 years where I was consulting, freelancing, that I thought maybe I should get a normal job. Maybe I should stop trying to build something. Like maybe I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur. And we didn't even call it, so what's funny is I didn't call it that back then. We were just like, maybe I shouldn't own a business. Maybe I should go work for somebody. And I think oftentimes people that have these setbacks, they ask themselves, even if they've had a little bit of success, but then they're having a hard time, they go like, maybe my time and energy would be better spent working for somebody else. And I went through that. And what changed was hiring a coach, this guy named Bob. And he showed me the area and processes I was missing. See, it's if I gave the same ingredients to 2 people and I said, we're going to make a chocolate cake, one person, I give them no instruction and say, hey, here's a bunch of ingredients. This is what it looks like when you're done and it's good. Mm-hmm. Go at it. Or the other person, I give them the recipe. Like one person's going to create a pile of mush. It might taste like chocolate, but you wouldn't want to eat it. And the other one's going to have this beautiful chocolate cake. Mm-hmm. What Bob gave me was the recipe that I was missing. So I had the energy, I had the desire, I wanted to build. I just didn't know how to put the sequences together. And the truth is sequencing equals success. If I don't have the order of things, then all the energy, all the enthusiasm, all the effort is going to fall on wasted effort. So Then I start my third company with Bob's help. We do almost $1 million our first year. And I'm like, all right, I'm seeing the path. And the problem was, though, is that I didn't know any other way other than 100-hour weeks. Like, just show up.
GSD energy.
Yeah, just spin the plates. Okay, what needs to get done? Who needs me? I don't care if it's Saturday, Sunday, holidays, weekends, like Christmas. There was zero part of my brain that cared about what time of day it was. If something felt like it was needing to get done, I tried to start it, push it, edge it, follow up, whatever. And that produced results. And I think what happened is I learned how to get results, but I never questioned if it was because of or in spite of. So I was winning, but it was costing me my energy, my health, and eventually my relationship. And at the end of that experience, this company I built for 4 years, after we exited, I realized that I can't do this again. There's just no way that, and cool, I made millions of dollars. I didn't have to work for a while or invest in some, if I didn't change my lifestyle, I would have been good. But there was a part of me that just had a desire for more. Like I was a creator. I was an entrepreneur. I wanted to build. And I took like a 2-year sabbatical to try to figure out, is there a different and better way? And that's when I moved to San Francisco. And
that's where you go to for a sabbatical. San Francisco.
You go to the city as a software guy, you go to the Disneyland of tech bros. And I learned there a completely different approach to building and scaling companies than the one I did, which was brute force. And that 4-year period left such a mark on me. There's a lot of PTSD from building that company that it took me 2 years and meeting a bunch of mentors like Naval Ravikant, who today is very well known, been on Joe Rogan. But like he showed me how to get leverage. He showed me how CEOs that are 20 some years old build 100 million revenue a year companies in 7 years. And yeah, they work a lot, but they do it through different forms of leverage. And that was the beginning of a completely different way to build, which became the foundation for that book.
Yeah, and Sam Altman just had an interview as well where he says that we're going to be seeing like 10-person billion-dollar companies here 100%. Shortly. He said eventually in the next decade we'll have a 1-person billion-dollar company valuation. He's without a question, bar none, that is going to happen. And I actually had Naval's CEO coach, Matt Mashari, on the podcast.
Yeah, I've had Matt is one of the smartest minds. Yeah.
He's a genius.
He wrote a great book, The Great CEO Within, everybody should read.
Yeah, beautiful. So before we go further into this conversation and about changing your levels, because different levels, different devils, right? Talk about the conversation you had with Renee that kind of changed everything, because there was a pivotal moment where you realized that things could not stay the same way that they were staying.
So that was actually not with Renee. That was my previous relationship, my fiance. And I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. Oh, it was almost dinner time because I ended up going to work. Back then, I just worked, right? So it was like super normal on a weekend to go to the office, process stuff. I pretty much lived in work mode. And I remember it was a Sunday morning and I go to the office and I remember my fiance at the time says, make sure you're home by 5 o'clock. We got dinner at my parents' house tonight. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I just got into flow. I don't know about you, man, but sometimes I get into it and I'm like in it and I'm creating and and it just feels good. I don't even look at the time.
Correct.
And I lift my head up and I'm looking at the clock and it's 5 something. And I'm like, oh no. So I run home and literally we just bought this new place. I run up the stairs, open the door, and I see her in tears in the kitchen. And she can't even breathe. She's just like beside herself. And eventually she just blurts out, I can't do this anymore. She takes the ring off, drops it on the counter, and walks right past me. Doesn't even look at me in the eyes. And she went to her parents, and she stayed there. And that was the last day we were ever together. 7 weeks before the wedding. So what was crazy is in that moment, everything that I had built to that point, multi-million-dollar company, brand new home, all the accolades, all the team, the infrastructure, the financial resources, everything that I had built to that point was for her, was for our future, was for our, the family we were going to start.
Been there.
And the crazy part about it, Brian, she didn't ask me for any of it. And I remember like months later, we talked. Like finally she was willing to take a call. And she'd gone past it. I don't know if you know this about women, but by the time they make the decision to leave,
Done.
it's been made.
It's been a year in the making.
Oh yeah, it's been made. And I had the gift from her to explain to me what I could not see. How I was acting, who I was, the selfishness in it all, the lack of understanding what she was saying and actually what I was hearing. And that's when I realized I had a tough time with that because I have an internal desire to create. And back then, I only knew one way. And the way was GSD energy, was attack, was 100% focus, go.
Or it's a waste of time.
Not even a waste of time. It was a fear that anything less wouldn't accomplish an outcome.
And you would look back 10 years from now and say, I wish I would have done more.
Wish I would have done more. And honestly, fear of failing. Like it was the only, so fail company, finally start this company, have success or is on a path to success, and just so scared that if I stop, like there's one way to move forward. If I even slow down, the whole thing's gonna fall in on itself. The whole house of cards is gonna come down. And because I didn't know any other way to build it, there was a period probably 7 months where I honestly thought for the rest of my life, I will have to resolve myself to just being the cool, rich uncle. I will not be in a relationship. I will never do that to somebody else again. I don't want to hurt somebody the way I did. I don't want to go through what I felt. And that was a reality I was willing to accept because that's just all I knew. I'm a creative person. I'm a driven person.
Just who I am, how I am.
Yep. And I was just so scared to do that again, to experience it again, to hurt somebody that way, to feel that way, that pain, that loss, that I got comfortable with that idea, which in hindsight, as a father of two, married to an incredible woman, would have been pretty sad, would have been the ultimate failure. Mm-hmm. So that moment was the catalyst that caused me to be willing and open to find a different way. And that's what I discovered.
And so then you did the ultimate, so we talk about GSD, and then we're talking about the ultimate S word, slow. It's still, right, the hardest thing for us to do as entrepreneurs. And so I want to talk to you later about the importance of A players. And you write in the book a really important quote. A players will only work for A players. Like, you cannot have a rock star unless you yourself are a rock star. I just met with the CEO of Keller Williams here in Austin, Texas, and he was talking about how if you hire 8s, then an 8 will attract an 8. But if you hire a 7, it's going to only hire 6s and 5s beneath them.
Because it's safe.
Yeah. So I'm curious, the same applies to relationships. So you had to slow the hell down and figure out who you were and what man you wanted to be able to attract someone like Renee. So what was that process like,
well,
especially with your spouse and all that?
Well, this is the funny part, right? Because like I get young men reaching out to me all the time, and they're very motivated, driven like yourself, and they're like, this is what I want for my life. I want this big life. I want a beautiful relationship. I want to travel the world with my kids. I want to be a multi-millionaire and all this stuff.
And the GSD energy gets you there. It gets you to the initial, yes, I made it, so this therefore works. But then what got you here will not take you there.
And what's funny is, like when they tell me all this stuff and I say, what do you want in a partner? And they're like, I'll tell you what's on my list. I want a tall, blonde, athletic, funny, caring, homebody, entrepreneurial, kind, witty, driven, like all these things. And what was funny is that when they tell me this, they make these like wish lists. I go, are you any of that?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I'm a little driven. I'm like, are you a 10 out of 10? I'm a strong 7.8. Dude, you're a 6.5 at best. Let's be honest. Because here's the thing is, you want those things, but you're not that person. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we attract who we are. So there's a reason why some people keep going in the same relationship over and over, because they're attracting that type of partner. So if you have a wish list that is a 10 out of 10, you got to ask yourself, how do I show up as that? I will tell you, my wife will not put up with the old Dan. Okay, that guy doesn't show up. But if he did, it's a quick shut that down. Okay. The workaholic, driven, not replying to me, not asking me about my opinion, not co-creating our future together. That person that was all in on Dan, if I showed up with that energy around my wife, there's about a half a millisecond where that is not going to zero. And that is what you want, right? You want to be in a relationship with somebody that challenges you to become more. And I think that is the most beautiful thing that a partner does. I honestly think a great partner will show you where you are not free. And that is the work that we should be on the journey to do. So who did I need to become to not only attract somebody, like, because that's the thing. Step one is be like, we don't create success, we attract success.
Bingo.
So who do you need to become to attract that person in your life? Once they're in your life, how do you show up every day in a way where they want to stay in your life? You talked about A players. The truth, unless they feel like they're in partnership and they're growing and they're learning and there's a future and there's a vision together that you're co-creating, like great people, this is funny, but it's not funny. Like when, again, these young people come to me and they're like, here's my wish list. I'm like, dude, do you realize that you just told me you want a unicorn? And that unicorn has options for every other unicorn in the world, and you aren't even close to being a unicorn?
My unicorn speaks Spanish.
Like, dude, I want a woman who's making $1 million a year and is kind and is beautiful and is athletic and I'm like, that woman can choose
anybody,
100 million men.
Yeah.
So if you think you're going to compete against that and you're lazy, dysfunctional, not prepared, can't brush your hair, whatever that thing is, like that the crazy chaos of your life, don't be surprised if you wake up one day and go, man, it's really tough to find somebody. It's because you don't find them, you attract them. So that's been the journey for me and continues to be, man, because I think a great spouse is also evolving themselves. So they're showing you like it's a dance. But definitely the Dan that you're talking to today is not the Dan of 28 years old. Like that person had to die for me to be able to create the space to be in relationship with my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're preaching to the choir, man. Like I'm someone that hasn't had that happen, like kind of, sort of, whereas I had this giant vision where I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take on the world and same thing. But then I realized I was like, I'm forcing this vision on somebody else that never even asked for it. So I'm doing like exactly every single thing that you just said. And I'm like on the tail end of it now, where now I'm on my 2 years of kind of slowness and getting still, right, to figure out the next thing. So you're preaching to the choir, man. Cool. Like that's why I asked these from that perspective of someone that literally like just went through it. So today, let's pivot and transition to some of the tips from the books, some of the strategies. What does winning look like for Dan Martell today?
I think... So what's interesting is I believe that all the achievement and goal setting and all that stuff is required to evolve, right? Because it's like they're like tools. If I want to go from point A to point B, well, I need to know what is the GPS coordinates of point B. Does that make sense?
Correct.
Like there needs to be a direction.
Where is there?
Yes, and what does there mean? But then the cool part is, the better question is, what does there unlock? So at that outcome, that goal, that $1 million in revenue or that incredible partner or those cool trips around the world, what feeling will that allow you to feel? And that is actually what success looks like for me. At the end of the day, and I talk about this in the book, I want to show people how to build a business they don't grow to hate by creating the space to build their empire. An empire in my world is a life of unlimited creation that you'd ever have to retire from. I actually think it's a beautiful question to ask yourself. What would you do with your life if you knew you could never retire? There is no retirement. You have to design the game of life to know the rules is to always play the game of life. See, most people are playing a game and they don't even realize what character they are, what position they play, how the game...
how it's even scored.
I don't know. I'm like, am I kicking this way or that way? So you're on this team. It's good to know. And I think the game of life comes down to expression and expansion. Like I'm addicted to the expansion of my being. And success is waking up every day and having a plan with the time I have here on earth to feel like I'm interacting and conversing and expanding that. And if that is what I do with my day, that's success. And that's what I protect. I definitely have gotten there, and I work to keep it and also expand that. But success for me every day, even like yesterday, we had a bunch of stuff come up and it changed and it tweaked, and I was like, ooh, I didn't like that. So today was like, hey,
Better remedy.
yeah, and I'm super lucky and fortunate to have the team to do that, and I don't. There's no like thing I have to do, but at the same time, I'm definitely not doing nothing, because I think for me, fulfillment comes from creation. I think a lot of people that don't have money, they're like, oh, if I had $1 million, I would retire and hang out on the beach. Just go. That's why you'll never have $1 million.
Bingo. Once you're able to retire financially, you're not able to emotionally or mentally.
What are we doing here? Like, what are you going to just turn into an amoeba? Like, you're just going to lay on the beach and turn into a rock and just like bake?
You get hungover fast.
What are we doing?
Exactly. Let's talk about some of the times, because you name in the book like some entrepreneurs like Oprah Winfrey, Richard Branson, like people that you would associate as being workaholics. And sure, for a season of their life, that was true. Like, it got them there, but then they realized that they had to change how they were doing things and delegate and leverage through people. So now they were able to buy back their time. So I want to talk about your DRIP framework first, because I literally just did this exercise. It's the exercise I talked about in the video with my team. I said, okay, here is what lights me up, and then here's what makes me money. Here's my zone of genius. Here's what doesn't light me up. Can you explain to people that are unfamiliar, what is this framework that you talk about?
Yeah, the framework, and I love that you bring out these people like the Bransons and the Oprahs and the John Clancy's in the book, or all these incredible artists, even Steve Jobs. Like, people assume, and some of them are, like Elon Musk, if you had to look at his calendar, I'm sure is back to back to back to back.
I don't think any of us want to be Musk, though.
No.
We're glad he exists, though.
Yeah. No. And he even says it, right? On Rogan, he's nobody wants to be me, right? There's some demons there, but it allows him to channel, again, probably more on the darker energy, to create a future that we'll all appreciate, and I definitely appreciate it. However, my philosophy is, in retrospect, if I sat down with any of those people and I asked them to give me some thoughts on how they could have changed the beginning days, right? Because you even mentioned it, like in the early days, you have to do that. Yes, but do you have to do it for 7 years, or could you have done it in 18 months had you understood a different way of working? Because how they create today is not how they used to create. When we have nothing, we build bottom up. If I have zero, I got to be resourceful. So I have to start with borrowing money and getting my cousin to help me out and asking for interns and all that stuff, because there's nothing, there's no resources to play with. So most businesses are built bottom up. Once you get to scale and have resources like myself, then we build top down. Meaning the first hire is actually the person who's going to run the division, run the new company. And that's a big mental shift. So how do we do that in today's world in your current business? And that's why I created the DRIP matrix. So the DRIP matrix essentially is an acronym, DRIP. And we start first with the bottom left quadrant, which is things that suck our energy, that don't make us a lot of money. And for most people, these are things that you should delegate. These are administrative tasks. These are things you should decide that you shouldn't be doing. They're distractions. They're things that you haven't made a decision around. For many of them, there's things you should defer into the future. So that, when we think of buying back our time, that first quadrant, super like low cost, easy to pull off, gets you time back in your calendar. Then
Virtual assistant.
Yeah, virtual assistant, administrative task, part-time somebody to come to your home, clean, do meal prep, that kind of stuff. Like, essentially, it's low cost to have somebody else support you so that you can get that time back to go work on things, which would be the next quadrant above it, which is R for replace. These are things that still don't light you up. They're not green, they're not fun, they're red, but they have to get done. But now that you've become more valuable, you have skills, you have more revenue, you can pay people to replace you out of those functions. And in that quadrant, I have this framework called the replacement ladder. And these are the 5 hires in sequence. If you're starting at 0, or if you're already at scale and you got to retool and come back, these are the 5. And I even talk specifically about the outcomes those 5 hires have to own and the order you do them. And the reason they're ordered in that way is because they're the lowest cost to invest in to buy back the most amount of your time.
Correct.
That's the game we're playing. Now, once we do the replacement ladder, then we get to move into the right side, which is the invest quadrant, which is the I, right? DRIP. And that, for me, it's really simple. It's answering the question, who do I need to become? I got to be honest about my situation. Here's my business. Here's where I want to go. This is the destination. What's missing in the business And in that missing, what skill do I have to acquire to be able to implement it? If it's, I'm not really good at marketing, go get good at marketing. If it's, I don't know how to do sales, or selling has never been a strong suit, that's maybe HR, maybe leadership, maybe operations, maybe money, whatever it is. There's a skill there that needs to be acquired. Because if you don't become more, then you'll never be given bigger problems. And the funny part is some people get stuck on $10 problems and they wonder why the world never gives them $1 million problems. Like, you want $1 million tax bill. Like, people are they're like, I don't want to pay taxes. Yeah, you do. You want $1 million tax bill. Period, full stop. You want 10 million. You want the biggest tax bill you could possibly get. Does that make sense, Brian?
Yeah.
Some people have a belief around money so much that they don't want to pay taxes, so much that they do so many stupid things with their finances to avoid paying taxes that they're literally majoring in minor things around their money that will never create the space for them to evolve into work on bigger strategic leverage deals, because they're dinking around with dumb stuff like writing off their dog for their taxes. So we're going to leave that one there. But that's the invest skill of really asking yourself, what is the character traits I need to acquire? What are the discipline? What are the mindset beliefs that I have that are holding me back? Money mindset, people mindset. A lot of people, nobody else can do it as good as me. Yep.
Guilty.
Guess what? Yep. You're right. You're like, literally, I believe you. And because of that, you will always be the only person that can do that thing. So you have one of two options. Either you work through that belief and get to a place where letting go doesn't give you anxiety and feel like pressure on your chest, or don't. And this is your complexity ceiling. And this is, I'll tell you what your life will look like in 3 years. The exact same. And we know these entrepreneurs, and sometimes they like shut the company down, start a new one.
And I'm sitting right here.
Just, dude, why are you peering into my heart? But that to me is the invest quadrant. And if you work through the model and then you get to the P, which is produce, at that level, you literally get to wake up and look at your calendar, and everything in there are things you want to do, you've chosen to do, you get excited. See, people get burnt out because they're working on stuff that burns them out.
Correct.
Dude, I don't get burned out when I'm doing stuff I want to do. I get burnt out when I'm busy doing stuff I don't like to do. If I like to do it, what if your job was doing the thing you love to do the most in the world? Are you going to get burned out? No. Exactly. So people sometimes are like, I need a break. I need a sabbatical. I got to take a week off. No, you just got to renegotiate what you're doing. P is produce, which is what position, what situation allows you to create the most economic value or unlock resources for your team. That's the way I call it resources, because it's money, it's people, it's influence, it's leverage, it's all the above. But what position on the team in my company allows me to create the biggest unlock of resources for my team? Because here's the kicker. The more I do there that I enjoy doing, the more resources I have to buy back my time. And that's why the whole premise of the book is build a bigger business and get a bigger life. Like, you can, get right off the bat, Brian, people think, like, they say this to me, hey man, I like my business, it's cool. I would never want to run a 1,000-person company.
Oh yeah?
Okay, let's talk about this.
Sure.
The person that says I would never want to run a 1,000-person company doesn't realize that company's a lot easier to run than your current company.
Oh shit.
What? You're telling me a $50 million a year company is easier to run than a $500,000 a year company by a factor of 100?
Wow.
Because honestly, at that level, you can decide if you want to be an owner, and you don't have to run anything. And you can, if you want to build the skills and invest in yourself, learn how to be an owner. And that is different than an operator. Dude, I started a company just now, again, top down. First hire was an operator. Like, I don't need to build that business. I can hire the person that's done it for 27 years.
God. Yeah, I love all of this, man. And you're hitting me between the eyes. And I love talking about it on the podcast, because this podcast is a live documentation of me I started this show 2.5 years ago when I was working a corporate job. And now it's just, now I've got to the 7-figure mark, and now it's my documentation to $10 million a year. So it's really cool to be able to have like almost these live coaching sessions. So I'll speak for the people that are listening right now, like where I'm getting stuck up, because you just said something that hit me between the eyes. You said you can either get over your belief that nobody can do this besides me, or you can be, okay, this is going to be the same forever. So this is a wall that you cannot go through. You have to like break through this belief and get around it. So for us, your replacement ladder, I really want to get into that in detail. It's administrative, then delivery, then marketing, then sales, then leadership. Admin is easy. I think anybody from the most virtual assistant, book calendar, pay invoices, that type of stuff. Deliveries, like your product, client success manager. We got that covered. She's a rock star. And then on top of that is marketing and sales. That's where we're at right now. Because when you're really good at something, it becomes increasingly more difficult for you to be like, if this is something that I'm not like strong at, I could easily give it away. But I'm like, man, I love marketing. I love sales. But it's now to the point where I can't be doing that and still working on the business. I'm working too much in the business. So marketing and sales is where I'm stuck right now. And then it goes into leadership. So that's where I'm at currently in my business, because we're about $1 million a year. So where you were. And now I'm just like, okay, now how do I delegate marketing and sales? Because now you're replacing yourself with sometimes more expensive talent than you're used to. And that's the problem that everyone runs into eventually is, I need this $100,000 or $200,000 a year person. How the hell do I afford them? So can you walk me through this right now? Because this is something that I'm going through, and I think a lot of people that are listening are as well.
Yeah, first off, let's talk about deploying dollars to buy back results. That's all. Like anytime it's hiring. And then the question, if we just reduce it to the essence of your question, is I have a fear around making a bigger bet than ones I've made in the past, right? But what people forget as they grow, if you're at $1 million in revenue, then your old bets that felt big are smaller because your revenue's bigger. So technically it's the same bet. You're still using absolute, the dollar.
Zeros.
Yes, instead of percentages. And then we say, okay, let's say the person costs $100,000 a year, but they unlock the ability for us to make $3 million a year. So how many $3 million wire transfers will you accept from me that you pay $100,000? So imagine I have a $3 million in cash and I will wire it to you, and all you got to pay me $100,000. How many of those are you going to do?
A lot.
As many as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So here's what's fascinating. Then, okay, what is the fear then? The fear is that I don't trust this person. I have a fear that I'm going to give this person or invest $100,000 and the wire transfer never comes back.
Yeah. We've all had that happen before.
Yeah. No, this is one of the biggest beliefs that I think entrepreneurs, and at different levels, you talk about levels and devils, most businesses like have these ceilings at the first ceilings at 300K because they could never get somebody else to do anything for them. That's too much fear. The next ceiling is about 2 million. And the reason why is because they'll never allow anybody else. They can delegate, but then everybody has to report to them. They have to manage it all.
Yeah, guilty. Yeah.
Okay. And then the next ceiling is 10 million. To go from 2 to 10, you have to learn to work through people. Okay. And that is the skill. So when you think of like, how do I make a bet of 100K on a person, knowing logically, if they could do what I'm doing, they will produce themselves, me not involved, $3 million in top line revenue through their activity. Then it's to say, how do I support, nurture, train, hire, retain it, and invest in that person? That's leadership. That is the skill. It's not a checklist. It's not a to-do. It's like you said, for me to hire somebody that can do that over and over, I have to create an environment and situation where they would want to work for me, because if I don't, they're going to go work for somebody else that's willing to pay them $150, as they should. So my whole thing is, it's understanding the human psychology is what needs to be true for somebody to want to be on your team. Not have to be on your team. See, a lot of people, that's why I don't like the word, yeah, dude, because we were talking about, or before we started recording, about boss, right? The word boss. Like it connotates you have to be here, you have to listen to me.
Yeah.
You mean, none of these people have to work for Dan.
Yeah.
They could literally go on Twitter now or Instagram and say, I used to work for Dan Martell, who wrote this book, hire me.
To that damn podcast.
They're gone. Like, I'm not an idiot. Okay. They are very talented and they're getting recruited and headhunted all the time. So then what needs to be true for them to decide to wake up to help me push and create this future is I need to create a future big enough for their dreams and goals to fit inside of.
The vision.
It has to be there. So most people, step number one is you have to have a vision that's bigger than the one you probably have, because it's not big enough for their stuff to fit inside of. Because if it's not, they'll go find the person that will tell them that story, and it's plausible. Because again, and I want them to be selfish. I want them to go, hey, this is what I want to do in the future. And if I can't see a path for me to do that here, then why would I invest in creating that for you? So that's step one. Two is, are you investing in those people? See, a lot of people, especially in the coaches or agency owners or any business, honestly, they spend more time trying to market and sell to customers than they ever do training their team. So just think about this simple concept. I have people that work for me, okay, and they are my most important resource. I believe we build people, build a business. But when I look at my calendar, where in there do I have allocation to develop the people on my team? Yeah. So if somebody works for you and you don't work with them to create their own coaching environment, their own mastermind, their own community, you showing up and doing leadership training, here's a simple tool to do this. Ask yourself all the areas of your team that you're frustrated with. Make a list. What are things your team does? If just name me one thing that your team might do that you might feel like a little frustrated with. What's on that list? Top one.
Marketing.
Okay, perfect. So the team doesn't know how to market. Okay. Other clients have asked this question. They'll say they don't know how to ideate in meetings. They don't know how to follow up. They suck at email. They're not responsible. They're slow. They never do what they say. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of stuff. So you have a list, and your top one right now is marketing. Then my question to you is, show me in your calendar where you've taught your team how to market. I already know the answer, Brian. I know.
What?
I know. It's like I have ninjas watching you.
Dude, but I'm perfect. I don't ever mess up. Dan.
It's not that you can mess up, but that's the transference, right?
Yeah.
Like you're building a team.
That's huge.
Yeah. So that's like all big companies do this. McDonald's has McDonald's University. Xerox has Xerox University. Like the biggest companies have the IBM way, the Dropbox way, the Shopify way. Shopify has internal executive coaching in their people team to develop their top talent. They believe in it so much, they put real dollars behind developing their people, because technically, if all people are available for the highest bidder, then if everybody's willing to pay the most, like a Google or Facebook or an Amazon, what's the difference maker? It's the company that can get the most performance out of the person, not who can pay the most. And that typically comes from investing in them. So most CEOs do not, if at all, actually have time in their calendar to train their people. And the coaches, you guys are the worst, because I look at your calendar and you got 25 hours in your calendar of coaching your clients.
Yeah.
Where are you coaching your team? The exact, like what is hilarious to me is the same thing you're doing for your clients, do it for your team and watch them thrive. I said this once to a client at events once, and she was like, she stopped and she paused. She looked at me, Brian, she goes, I don't think I like my team that much. Oh.
Uh-oh.
You don't want, she literally said, I don't want to invest in those people. You got a problem with your people. Like, you imagine getting to a place where you've hired a bunch of people that can do the work, but they're frustrating you, and I tell you your job is to train them, and then your reaction is, I don't think that's a good use of my time. You get the wrong people.
I've heard that a lot. And also, we had I forget, it was Mark Moses. He was the CEO of CEO Coaching International. He goes, for a show of hands in the room, we had a room of 400 people. It said, show of hands, who has fired somebody too fast? Not a single hand goes up. He's like, yeah, a single hand never goes up. It's always, I should have fired that person a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, but you don't. Same applies to marriages sometimes and relationships. You're like, I know this isn't working, but I'm going to hold on for dear life. It's crazy, especially when you just like, the people that got you here are also maybe sometimes not the people that take you there.
Oh, this data's there.
Yeah.
Like most people, if you're a fast growing company growing 50% per year, I think it's less than 8% of the people on your current team will be there in 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're doubling every year or growing 50% more, it is, if they are there at that pace of change, it's because you haven't really properly assessed people.
So you said something to go a bit of a pivot. You talked about problems before, and you positioned them in an interesting way. You're like, you should be asking for problems. You should be begging for problems, the right problems, not small problems, but big problems. And it's just like, people think that you can out-earn problems, but business is literally solving larger
problems.
The larger problem you solve, the more profits you get. So talk about your relationship with problems and how that's evolved over your entrepreneurship career.
Yeah, first off, I think the first thing is the way I think of a problem is completely different than most people starting off, or really people that are like before their first million.
Okay.
Yeah. So like everything that I see that is not working out, I don't call them problems. I call them puzzles. And just that reframe right there, you felt it, right? Like it's not a problem, it's a puzzle.
Just a silly little puzzle.
Yeah, and what do you do?
Sued.
What do you do? But what do you do with a puzzle?
You solve it.
Okay, perfect. Most people with a problem, they go, it's a problem, so I don't know what to do. With a puzzle, you try to solve it. It's fascinating how just the frame of that changes the relationship and energy you bring to it.
Wow.
So first off, I don't look at it the same way. Second, I realize that every puzzle that's produced in my life, as long as they're bigger and bigger, it means I'm doing the right thing. So I'm not saying it's good to be sued, but if you're being sued for bigger puzzles, then that might be an indication. Not that you shouldn't try to protect yourself, legal infrastructure, finance.
Oh, yeah,
that's
random problem. Random puzzle.
Yeah, random it's a good catch. I think that there's that part of it, and then there's also that's my opportunity to grow. So like I have never changed, evolved, expanded when things were not puzzles. Zero. Is it like there's no way, Brian, you wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't encounter some puzzles in your life. And whatever you want to achieve, I'm going to guarantee you it will not come to light if you don't deal with other puzzles. So right off the bat, they're almost required, and my relationship with them is thank you. And thank you, especially if they're really good and meaty, because I think of it as a worthy opponent. Dude, if you're executing and you're growing, yes, hey, welcome, worthy opponent, let's go, puzzle time. And then you can actually get really creative about it. And that, I think what's funny is entrepreneurs, like that's actually our addiction. Our addiction is to encounter puzzles, problems, and overcome them. And if they weren't hard, guess what? We wouldn't do them. And I know that because if I said, hey man, let's go do some invoicing, you're like, no. I already know how to invoice, and if I don't want to do it because there's nothing hard about it.
Can I share? Okay, so I literally just went through this, and I was wondering what the hell was wrong with me. So we just threw like this huge event, and it was awesome. We did it great. We booked out these multi-million-dollar mansions in Cabo. We booked a yacht. We had all these people. We flew them out. It was a great time. It was our second event that we've ever done, and it was awesome. But I found that I got more satisfaction. I got more enjoyment out of planning the thing and getting the thing done with my team because it was a puzzle to solve. And I actually truly view those as puzzles. I was just like, okay, I want you on catering, you on this. And then I found that when I was actually experiencing the thing, I couldn't really be fully there, but without thinking about the next one. Because immediately my brain goes back to puzzle mode. I'm like, I'm not solving anything right now. Therefore, I feel
not useful.
I feel anxious. And you talked about these sabbaticals and all this stuff. And you have this point in the book that hit me so hard. And it was about being addicted to chaos. Being addicted to chaos. And a lot of us call ourselves business owners. We're really self-employed. And we love chaos. Maybe we came up in chaos, and maybe chaos through just a bunch of action taken is what got us to our level of success today. And you talk about a story of an entrepreneur that just dips out and things are going really well.
Yeah,
I'm just going to leave and take a vacation. I'm not going to tell my team about it at all.
Or something stupid.
Yeah. And then they're almost like, can you share this story? Because this is, I read it and I underlined it and I circled it. And I said, how many times has that been me where I create my own problems?
Yeah. What happens is most entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they can deal with a high level of uncertainty. That's why they're able to create, and other people that have jobs and 9-to-5s and work at the government or whatever, they admire. They're like, how did you do that? Like, I could never do that. I have all these responsibilities and I went to university so they're anti-risk. But what they're really saying is I'm anti-uncertainty. I need certainty. We go, if it's too certain, I'm bored.
Hate it.
The event's already been produced and I'm at it. And I'm thinking about how do we create the next thing because that's got a lot of question marks around it.
I'm not stimulated.
Yes. So the challenge is that the thing that allowed us to become the person that is in business and successful can also be our Achilles heel. Because when things start going good, we have a tendency to grab a hand grenade and lob it into the business and decide, oh, it's Monday. I want to launch a new product line. I want to change our website. I want to change our vendor. I just hired 14 people. They're starting on Tuesday. Because like that feels good. Because yes, uncertainty, right?
Now I'm needed again.
Yes. So you're creating the pain to be able to feel needed. So I had a client, Trevor, and we were working together. And look, I taught him how to buy back his time. He ended up almost tripling his business. He was doing really well. And I get a text message from him, and he says, hey, man, heading to, I think it was Thailand for 6 weeks, disconnecting, not doing emails. SOPs are in place. Going to see how the team reacts. What part of you thinking owning a company is the CEO leaving for 6 weeks and disconnecting?
Yeah.
And I just said, hand grenade, ? And he's like, oh. And it was fascinating because he was self-sabotaging. Here's a big thing, Brian. Self-sabotage is beliefs around what would be true if you actually achieved your goal that are limiting beliefs that are from, honestly, our childhood. For example, some people have unconscious beliefs around being rich.
Yeah.
Like, and I'll say whatever word would freak them out: rich, effing rich, wealthy, ridiculously, like filthy rich. Maybe that's too much. I'm okay making $1 million, but I ain't cool making $1 billion. I'm not cool making 100 million. I'm not cool having supercars in my driveway. I'm not cool. One of my friends the other day, I live in a normal house. Why? Is that literally what you want? I don't need that. Why? It's fascinating to hear the psychology and the resolution of why that is. And the reason why, and self-sabotage will always show up to cause us to never live into that bigger version of ourselves. Some people want to have an audience on social media. They don't realize they have a subconscious belief that if I was famous, that I would have to deal with stalkers, or if I was famous, people would be trying to steal my identity, or if I was, and they're not aware it's going on, man. And yet, so what happens is when they're about to have a breakthrough moment, they get invited to keynote Tony Robbins, they get invited to get on a major stage or a major podcast, they drag their feet. They don't prep. They kibosh it, and they don't even know they're doing it. Just like my client Trevor was about to go self-sabotage his whole business because he didn't feel worthy of succeeding. Literally, when we got on the call, the next coaching call, and I started asking him what really came up, he told me, I didn't realize that I was scared to actually win. I was scared, like you say you want to do 10 million a year. There's beliefs that are probably there around what would that mean for your life. Responsibilities. Think about this. Now I'm at 10. What if I get to 10 and I drop back down to 6 publicly?
Ooh.
It's all these weird, it's like standards. It's what if I lose the weight and put it back on? What if I build the audience and then get canceled? Dude, there's all these fears that people have, and until they address it, they won't even know that every time they're about to have a breakthrough, they will self-sabotage themselves back to the level that they believe they deserve.
Over and over again.
Over and over.
And it's funny that you say that, because it's a quote that I heard once before where it's your greatest weakness is your greatest strength overused. So it's like people that are, I'm a people person, right? Well, then you can also become a doormat because you give so much that now it's just people take advantage. It's like your confidence can be your greatest asset, but then it also becomes cockiness when overused. So same thing with entrepreneurs.
Or you have a challenger mentality, and it's good in certain environments to challenge people, but you can't do it all the time because then you have people quitting.
Bingo. So Dan, as we wrap up, where can people find out more about you, what you do? Where can people get the book? Tell us a little bit more.
Brian, a lot of people read the book and they meet my assistants and they're like, how do I have somebody like that? I'll give them my internal standard operating procedure.
Hot damn.
Do you think they want it?
Do they deserve it?
Here's the deal. Go on Instagram, follow me. That's the only thing I'm going to ask you for. Message me EA Brian or EA this podcast or whatever. You have to tell me that you heard me from here, because if not, I'm not sending it to you. And I'll send you the direct Google Doc. Like no opt-in, no nothing. It's the link, sanitized version. I think it's like 30 some pages. Ooh. And the most important part I want people to read are the 5 North Star principles. These 5 North Star principles essentially encapsulate the rest of the 30 some pages into the focus for your assistant to serve you and support you in getting your time back. Instagram, Dan Martell, 2 L's of Martell, and then the book's available at Buy Back Your Time. It's available everywhere, bookstores, Amazon. But if you go to the site, then I give you the resources, because there's a lot of worksheets and templates I didn't put in the book that are available there. So you can download those. And I'm Dan Martell, 2 L's of Martell on all platforms, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the fun stuff.
Love it, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, and this has been great.
Appreciate it, Brian.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Boom. Stop.
Boom, bada bang.